We're on DAF Chav Ches Amud Aleph, Tana Rabbanan, second line. The Gemara had told us that Rabbi Eliezer, the great Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkinus, which the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says he's like a borsut she'eno ma'abei tipa. He's like a well-sealed cistern that doesn't lose a drop of water, is known for his retention of information, but to the point where he felt it as his responsibility to be a recorder of information from the previous generation, and therefore he limited himself and restricted himself to only saying over words that he had heard from his teachers. He had plenty to say, but he felt that it was a greater duty that he had to the Jewish people to transmit instead of innovating. Tana Rabbanan, the Brisa says, Maaseh b'Rebbe Eliezer sheshavas b'Galil ha'elyon. So he once was spent Shabbos in the Upper Galilee, and it seems like it was over Sukkos. V'sha'aluhu shloshim halachos b'hilchos Sukkah. And they asked him 30 halachos having to do with the laws of Sukkah. Shtei Mesrei amar lahem shamati, shmona asar amar lahem lo shamati. So 12 he was able to answer by saying, this is what my teachers taught me. And the other 18, he said, I never heard anything from my rabbis on that matter. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Omer Chiluf Hadvarim, Shmona Asar, Omer Lahem Shamati, Shtei Mesrei, Omer Lahem Lo Shamati. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda has a different tradition of that story. He was asked 18 questions that he answered based on his teachers, and 12 he could not answer because he did not have information from his teachers.
So already forgetting.
The irony is that we don't even remember what the story was. Yeah. So Amru Lo, Kol Divarecha Einon Elami Pi Hashmua. So they said to him, Rabbi Eliezer, come on. The only things you're going to tell us are things that you heard. Can't you come up with your own answers? So Amar Lahem, he's kaktuni lomar davar shalom hashamati mipi rabosai. Because you've challenged me, you now have required me to tell you something that I did not hear from my teachers. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. Miyamai lo kadmani adam beveis hamedrash. There was never a situation where a person came earlier than me to the Beis Medrash. V'lo yashanti bebeis medrash lo shinas keva v'lo shinas arai. I never slept in the Beis Medrash, not even a cat nap. V'lo hinachti adam bebeis hamedrash v'yatsasi. There was never a person who stayed later than me in the Beis Medrash. I was always the earliest in. I was always the latest out. And I never wasted time. I never slept at all in the Beis Medrash. V'lo sachti sichas chulin v'lo amarti davar shalom shamati mipi Rebbe me'olam. And not only that, I never had idle conversation. I was always attentive. So based on that, and the reason I need to tell you this is because you shouldn't think I'm a slouch, that I'm only capable of saying things from my Rebbeim. Oh no, I know my stuff. But I still insist on only repeating things that I heard from my teachers because I feel that that's my duty, that's my responsibility to the next generation. It could be because of the times in which he lived, right? Which were very precarious times where there was a need to perpetuate the Masorah. Amru alav al Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai miyamav lo sachsi chaschulin v'lo halach daled amos v'lo toru v'lo tefillin, that they said about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was the teacher of Rabbi Eliezer, that he never had idle conversation, was never caught schmoozing, he never walked 4 amos without Torah discussion and without tefillin. V'lo kadma adam beveis hamedrash, no one ever came before him into the Beis Medrash. V'lo yashan beveis hamedrash lo shinas keva v'lo shinas aray, he never slept, not even a cat nap in the Beis Medrash. V'lo hirher b'mavuos hametunafos, and despite his great Torah immersion, he precluded himself from thinking words of Torah in dirty alleyways, right? It's one of the things you can say a eulogy about a person who you can't find anything good to say about him, is that he never taught words of Torah in a dirty alleyway. V'lo hiniach adam beveis hamedrash v'yatza, that he never allowed anyone to stay later than him in the Beis Medrash. V'lo metzo adam yoshev v'domem ele yoshev v'shonem. No one ever found Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai just sitting there doing nothing. He was never idle for a moment. Anytime you saw him, he was studying. V'lo pasach adam delis l'talmidav elohu ba'atzmo. Not only this is an amazing thing. This thing shows you the greatness of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, that he always insisted on opening the doors for his students.
How did they go through?
What?
He opened it
Talmud go before his Rabbi.
He insisted. He ordered them. He ordered them to walk in, and they had to listen.
First, he opened the door.
I understand. I've been in that situation.
Right.
You go through.
Right, but he commanded them to go in. Right, so it also means, like Mark is saying, that he was always the first in the cheder. You know, he made sure that he was there before them. V'lo amar davar shelo shama mipi rabu me'olam. He too, like his disciple Rabbi Eliezer, only said things that he had heard from his teachers. V'lo amar higia islamon v'beis hamedrash chutz me'arbe psocha me'arbe yom kippurim. Also, he never told his students it's time to get up and leave the Beis Medrash. He always let them stay late, except for 2 times in the year. One was Erev Pesach, because they had to bring the Korban Pesach during the earlier part of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai when the temple was still standing. And also because you have to do the Seder early so that the children won't fall asleep, which is why I don't allow long Divrei Torah the nights of the Siddharim, because there's a halacha that you have to start the Seder as soon as possible. And also on Erev Yom Kippur, he told his Talmidim, go home, there's a mitzvah to eat today, to get ready for Yom Kippur. V'chein haya Rabbi Eliezer Talmido noeg acharav, and Rabbi Eliezer, his disciple, always did as he saw from his Rebbe, and that's why Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkinis never said anything over other than what he had heard from his teachers. Tanu Rabbanan, Shmonim Talmidim hayilo lehillel hazaken. So the rabbis teach us that Hillel Hazaken, the elder Hillel, had 80 students. 30 of them were worthy of having the Shechina rest upon them like Moshe. 30 of them were worthy of having the sun stand still for them like Yehoshua. So basically you're seeing 2 classes. One is the class of Moshe Rabbeinu, the other is the class of Yehoshua, slightly less than them, but still very chashuva guys. Esrim Beinoniim, and then 20 Beinoniim. Now there's 2 ways of understanding the word Beinoni over here. Either it means that they're lower than the other 2 classes, because, to be like Moshe or Yehoshua means that you're an amazing tzaddik, and a Beinoni is less than that. Or Beinoni could also mean between Moshe and Yehoshua. In the middle between those 2. And Gadol Shebekulan, and then the question is, who was the greatest of them? Now, so there are different ways of understanding Shebekulan. It could mean the greatest of the 80, or it could mean the greatest of the ones who were in the group of Moshe. It could also be the greatest of the Beinonim. There's different ways that the Meforshim speak it out. So the greatest of them was Yonasan ben Uziel. Katan Shebekulan Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So even though Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai has just been praised with these amazing accolades, nevertheless you should realize he was the lowest of those students. Amru alav Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai shelo hiniach mikru Mishnah Gemara halachos va'agados, that he didn't forsake any area of Torah. He was always immersed in biblical text, Mishnah, Gemara meaning the explanation of the Mishnah, halachos, which means understanding the halachos l'Moshe Sinai, knowing all of the Mosaic traditions, va'agados, agadata, as we know the homiletics of the Gemara, Dikduke Torah, which means studying all of the kris and the ksibs and the words that have a vav, that don't have a vav, that have a yud, that don't have a yud. B'dikduke Sofrim, all of the punctilious decrees of the sages. Kalim v'chamurim, the kal v'chomers of Chazal. Ugezera Shavos, all of the hermeneutic teachings that are based on the psukim. Tukufos, the calendar system, knowing about the Jewish calendar. The Gimatrios, numerological derivations, Sichas Malachei Hashares, V'sichas Shedim, V'sichas Dekolim, the conversations of angels, of Shedim, and of trees. Rashi says, I don't know what the trees are, but there are different ways of understanding this. Obviously, this is dealing with mystical texts that discuss things that you can learn, that angels teach us, that Shedim teach us, and that trees teach us. What sometimes, even in pantheism, the trees are talking, and the trees can communicate with each other, and so forth. So, or someone told me they saw in the art school, this means that medicinal cures that you can derive from the trees, from the plant world. Anyway, Mishalos Kovsim, Mishalos Shu'olim, different kinds of fables and metaphors and parables that they call the parables of the launderers and the foxes, meaning that, like Aesop's fables that teach moral lessons. Davar Gadol v'Davar Katan, and large things and small things. What does that mean? Davar Gadol Maaseh Merkava. The Rambam quotes this in Hilchos Yisodei HaTorah. What are great things? Maaseh Merkava, the act of the chariot, which Rambam calls metaphysics. And that's why the Rambam begins his Mishnah Torah with the discussion of Maaseh Merkava. And Davar Katan Havayos de Abaye v'Rava. And what's the small thing? The questions that are raised by Abaye and Rava, even though he's many generations before them, this Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, but all of the questions that are raised in Abaye and Rava were discussed in prior generations and were forgotten, so that Abaye and Rava had to ask them again. This fulfills within Rabbi Yochanan to give an inheritance of my beloved one's yesh, which represents all the comprehensive Torah knowledge, the otzroseim amalei, and their storehouses shall I fill. So now the Gemara says, if that was what the smallest of them was, of this group of Talmidim, then surely the greatest of them was even much greater. And the famous story about Yonasan ben Uziel, when he would sit and study Torah, was with such fiery intensity that if a bird flew over his head, it would be incinerated. Rashi explains that this is because the Malachim came to listen to him learn Torah. And the Malachim are made of fire, so therefore, don't cross their path, right? Their airspace. Right, their airspace, their fly zone, right? And Tosfos says it's because when Yonasan ben Uziel would study Torah, it was a replication of Maimon Har Sinai. It was so intense. And just like there was a fire atop Har Sinai, so too there was a fire above him. Let's go on to the next Mishnah. Obviously, there's so much depth in this Gemara. It's chaval that we can't spend a week or two on this.
This is very similar Gemara to one Ramchal brings down about Yerichas Yamim. Why it was that they asked some of these exact same.
Bameh herach yamin. What did you do to deserve long life? Yeah. Right. Mishnah. Misha Yarosha Veruba Besukkah V'Shulchano B'Socha Bayis Beishamai Poslim Beisilum Machshirin. We had learned this Mishnah completely before in the first parak, so we're just going to repeat it now. You'll see the Gemara doesn't even spend a lot of time because it's already all been discussed in the previous chapter. That if someone the majority of his body was in the sukkah, but his table is outside the sukkah, so Beis Shammai say that's pasul and Beis Hillel say it's kosher. Remember we said that Beis Shammai's concern is that you're going to be nimshach acharav. You're going to, because you may be hungry and you'll lean over on the table and grab the food and so forth, so you'll be outside the sukkah. And that's how we paskin. This is one of the few times we paskin like Beis Shammai. That's why a sukkah has to be 7 by 7 tfachim to fit your body and your table. So Amru lahem Beis Hillel leBeis Shammai lokacha yamaisa shalchu zukenei Beis Shammai zukenei Beis Hillel levakeres Rabbi Yochanan ben Achornis umitzau sheyoshev roshu veruba b'sukkah b'shulchana b'socha bayis v'lomer lo davar. So the Beis Hillel says to Beis Shammai, look, don't you guys remember our teachers taught us that a generation ago, perhaps years ago, our elders went to visit Rabbi Yochanan ben Achornis, and they found him in a sukkah, and his table was outside the sukkah, and they didn't protest. So Amr lahem Beis Shammai misham raya avheim Amr lo imakena yisanoi lo kiyamta mitzvah sukkah miyamecha. They said, what are you talking about? Our tradition is that our elders said to him, Rabbi Yochanan ben Achornis, if this is the way you comport yourself, then you've never fulfilled the mitzvah of sukkah. So you see clearly, what is it? They don't remember what happened? Of course they remember. The problem is that Beis Hillel's rabbis told them that when we came to visit him, we thought what he was doing was fine. The elders of Shammai told their disciples when we went to visit him, we told them what he was doing was wrong, and they didn't hear each other. The point is that what you see from this story is that this is a long-standing machlokus that is multi-generational. It goes from teacher to disciple. Anyway, Noshim v'avodim u'ketanim peturin min ha-sukkah. Women, slaves, and children are patur from sukkah. Katan shenatzarech li'imo chayiv b'sukkah. But if the child is old enough, and we'll see that he's reached the age of chinuch, that he doesn't need his mother anymore, so then he's obligated in sukkah. Ma'aseh v'yolda kalasa shel Shammai hazaken. There was once a story when Shammai's daughter-in-law, the elder Shammai, his daughter-in-law gave birth over Sukkot, or shortly before Sukkot. She had the baby in a crib, and he made a breach in the ceiling and put schach on it so that the kid could have a sukkah over his crib. Now this seems to contradict what we've just said. So the Gemara is going to ask that. Why do you bring me a story that subverts what we've just taught? The Gemara now says, Minahani Mili. Where do we know this, that women and children and servants are patur from a sukkah? Detana Rabbanan Ezrach ze Ezrach, ha Ezrach lahotzi es anoshim. So the Brisa says the word Ezrach means any normalized, naturalized Jew. The word ha Ezrach, which is the definite article the, is coming to exclude women. So from here you see that women are patur from sukkah. And kol, and where do you know that children, once they've reached a certain age, are obligated in sukkah? From the word kol, because the Torah says, kol ha'ezrach b'Yisrael yeshvu basukos. All the Ezrach in Israel shall live in sukkah. So the word kol includes children, and ha, the letter hey, excludes women. Amar Mars, let's analyze this. Ha'ezrach lahotzias hanoshim. Remember the Ezrach bein nashim bein gavri mashma. So if it sounds like from this brisa that the letter hey excludes women, it's mashma that if you have the word Ezrach without the letter hey, that's inclusive of both men and women. But that's not true because vehatanya ha'ezrach l'rabos es hanoshim ha'ezrachios hanoshim ha'ezrachios shechayavos be'inoi alma ezrach gavri mashma. There's another brisa that talks about the laws of Yom Kippur, and there the word ha'ezrach is also taught, and there the brisa says that if you just had the word ezrach without the letter hey, it would imply only men, and ha'ezrach is not a miyut, is not an exclusionary hey, it's an inclusionary hey, to add that also women are obligated. So it's mamish just the opposite of what I'm teaching by sukkah. By sukkah, I'm saying the extra letter hey is excluding women, and here I'm saying the extra letter hey is inclusive of women. So what's going on over here? So Amar Rabba Hilchas Saninu Vasmachina Rabbanan Akroi. So the Rabba says, you know what? You're right. One of these brises is an imposter. One of these brises is using the word ha'ezrach not in the correct format of the rabbinic hermeneutical method, but rather is just telling you we have a halacha l'Moshe Misinai that this is the halacha, and we're using the pasuk just as a mnemonic reminder, but not using it in the technical sense of deriving it from the word ha'ezrach. So the Gemara says, okay, which one? Hey krava, hey hilchasa. So first of all, which one is the legitimate brisa? Is it sukkah or Yom Kippur? And which one is the halacha l'Moshe Misinai, which is not using the pasuk legitimately? And furthermore, v'su kra lamali, hilchasa lamali. Let me ask you another question. Whichever one is the halacha l'Moshe Misinai, whichever one is based on the pasuk, why should you need either? Both of these halachas, that a woman is patur from sukkah, and that a woman is obligated to fast on Yom Kippur, you shouldn't need either of these brises to know that automatically, because hasukah mitzvah sasei she'azman grama, v'chol mitzvah sasei she'azman grama nashim peturos. For sukkah, to know that women are patur from sukkah, that's the standard mitzvah sasei she'azman grama. It's a time-related, time-bound, positive commandment. So why do you need any kind of tradition or pasuk to tell me that women are patur? And furthermore, v'yom kippur midar Rav Yehuda Marav nafka, damar Rav Yehuda Marav v'chein tana devei Rabbi Yishmael amar kra. Ish o isha, hishva hakasav isha leish l'chol onshin shebetorah. This pasuk that is being quoted in this brisa from Tana Devei Rabbi Yishmael is about the korban chatas, and it's telling me that the Torah says ish o isha. Both a man and a woman are subject to bringing a korban chatas for any violation of a negative commandment. So you see from this pasuk that anytime a person is told not to do something, men and women are absolutely equal. The only time there's a division between men and women is when it comes to positive commandments that are time-bound. But when it comes to mitzvahs lo saseh, that which you're not allowed to do, where the Torah prescribes a penalty for its violation, then surely men and women are the same. By Yom Kippur, there's a penalty of kares if you don't fast. So obviously I know from this standard halacha, this generic halacha, this sweeping halacha, that women are included in the obligation to fast on Yom Kippur. What do you need a special halacha l'Moshe Misinai or a pasuk for that? So we have two questions. Number one, we're not sure which is the halacha l'Moshe Misinai and which was the legitimate pasuk. And we also have a question, why do you need either if you know from the general principles that women are patur from sukkah and are obligated to fast on Yom Kippur? So Amar Aryai la'olam sukkah hilchasa. So Aryai says, let me clarify it for you. Really, the real way of learning the pasuk is Ezrach just means men, and ha-Ezrach includes or adds women. So the brisa with sukkah is the imposter. Really, it's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai that women are exempt from sukkah. And we're just relying on the pasuk to remind us of the halacha l'Moshe Misinai. So the question then is, so why do you need halacha l'Moshe Misinai to tell you that women are exempt? I'll tell you why. Because I might have thought that the Torah says, live in your sukkah for 7 days. How does a man live? You're not really living unless you're married. You're not really living unless you're with your wife. right? So I might have thought, how can I possibly live in my sukkah if my wife is putter and she's living inside the house? So maybe my wife is obligated for the sake of me, for the sake of her husband. So therefore the pasuk tells you no, or the halacha l'Moshe Misinai, I should say, tells you that no, even though your husband is in the sukkah, your wife is putter. By the way, I should point out that many poskim say that if your wife, for whatever reason, if there's no privacy in the sukkah, let's say you have, all of the kids home from yeshiva, and you got your parents, your in-laws, and they all want to sleep in the sukkah, and you want to sleep with your wife, then you're actually putter from sukkah because you can't have the privacy that you need in order to be intimate with your wife. So that's why many poskim say that when all things are equal, there's an obligation, whenever possible, to build a little bedroom for yourself in the sukkah that you can have privacy. This is very impractical in most situations, unless you have infinite resources, right? And you can do.
I used to have a neighbor. He had a balcony, and he put a SUKKAH on there, and like a small little balcony. That's probably the reason. That was why I probably slept there.
Right. So you can have two sukkahs, one in the balcony for you and your wife, and one for the rest of the mishpach.
We hope the neighbors don't have a balcony also.
They got divorced, by the way.
I'm sorry to hear that. Okay. I'm not sure if there's any lesson there or not.
No.
Okay. Rava Amar. Rava says, Rava says, I'll tell you why you need a halacha. I have a different reason why you need a halacha l'Moshe Misinai for sukkah. Even though it's still a mitzvah to say shezman groma. Salka daita chamina, yolev chamishas mechag amatzos, malahala nashim chayavos, avkan nashim chayavos, kamash malon. Because I might have thought that the Torah has a connection. Both Pesach and Sukkot are b'chamisha asar yom lachodesh. They're on the 15th day of the month. And so therefore we know that women are obligated in all the mitzvahs of Pesach, achilas matzah, etc. How do we know that? Because we learned in Maseches Psachim that anyone who's obligated in the prohibition of chametz is obligated in the positive commandment of eating matzah. So therefore we know that women are obligated in Pesach. I might have thought that through that connection of 15:15, that women are also obligated in the mitzvah of eating in the sukkah, living in the sukkah, kamash malan, that they're not. Fine. V'hashta da'amar sukkah hilchasa kra lamali. So now the question is, so what is the real meaning of the pasuk when it says ezrach and ha-ezrach, and the letter hey is a reboy, it's coming to add something? What is it coming to add by when it says kol ha-ezrach yeshvu basukos? The Gemara says l'rabos esager is coming to include converts. Salka daita chamina ha-ezrach b'Yisrael amar rachmana v'lo esagerim kamash malan. I might have thought that only people who are natural-born Jews should have an obligation of sukkah because the Torah uses the word ezrach. And by the way, you'd have to work out logically why a sukkah is related to Jews who were non-converts, perhaps because it's reminiscent of our dwelling in booths in the desert, which was uniquely a Jewish experience, having nothing to do with the convert. And therefore you might think that the convert is putter, and therefore you need the word ha-ezrach with the hey to tell me that they're obligated as well. Now, let's talk about Yom Kippur. Yom HaKippur midarav Yehuda marav nafka. So the question is, why do you need a pasuk to tell me that women are obligated to fast if I know that all negative commandments are inclusive of women? The Gemara answers, Lo nitzrucha ela letosefes inoi. Salkadaita chamina holo miyat rachmana letosefes inoi me'onesh u'me'azar lo nischayvu nashim klal kamash milan. I might have thought as follows. You see, there's an additional law that not only are you obligated to fast on Yom Kippur, but if you remember from Maseches Yoma, there's also an obligation to add on to Yom Kippur, both at the beginning and at the end, a few moments, to add on to the fast of Yom Kippur. Now, the Gemara had explained over there that obligation to add on a few moments at the beginning and end of Yom Kippur, if I do end up eating during that Tosefes period, I do not incur a penalty at all. I don't get kares. So therefore, since there's no negative commandment, there's no kares that comes along with that violation, perhaps women are exempt. This is only a mitzvah saseh, and it's a time-related mitzvah saseh. So therefore, I might have thought that women are patur from Tosefes. Kamash malan, that's why the pasuk says, Kol ha-ezrach by Yom Kippur, to tell me that no, women are included in the obligation of Tosefes as well. Let's go weiter. Amar mar, kol l'rabos u'saktanim. The word kol when it talked about the laws of sukkah, is coming to be inclusive of children. So v'hatna nashim v'adon v'katan p'tur min as-sukkah. But we know that children are patur, like our Mishnah says. How can you tell me that kol is inclusive of children? Lo kasher kan bekatan shegiya l'chinuch, kan bekatan shelo higiya l'chinuch. There's two different ages of children. One age is a child has reached the age where he can appreciate the mitzvah of sukkah, and one where he's not yet old enough to live in a sukkah. And that's the difference. So kol is coming to tell me that once the child has reached the age of chinuch, he's obligated in the mitzvah of sukkah. So frak the Gemara, katan shegiya l'chinuch midrabbananu. But that's only a rabbinic law, this mitzvah of chinuch. It's not a Raizel law that you can make a derivation from a pasuk. Gemara says, you're right. Midrabbananu kras machda ba'almahu. You're right. Just like we said that the first part of that brisa by sukkah was an asmachta, so too the word kol with a katan is also only an asmachta. It's only a rabbinic law. Let's go weiter. Katan she'no tzarech li'imo chulei. When a child does not need his mother, that's when that defines when he's reached the age of chinuch, when he no longer needs his mommy. So the Gemara says, "Hey chidami katan she'no tzarech li'imo." What is a description? In other words, how do you define that he doesn't need mommy anymore? So Amri devei Rabbi Yanai kol shenifna ve'en imo mekanchaso. That if he goes to the bathroom and he doesn't need his mommy to wipe him anymore. I know some old men who haven't reached that age yet. But anyway, that's another story. But in any event, when a child is independent enough that he doesn't need his mother anymore to go to the bathroom, then he's old enough to live in the sukkah. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Omer Kol Shaner Mishanaso Ve'eno Kari Ima. So Reish Lakish says that if he wakes up from a bad dream at night and he doesn't say "Mommy, Mommy," so then he's old enough to live in the sukkah by himself. So frak the Gemara Gedolim Nami Karu. Even adults will wake up from a bad dream and say "Mommy, Mommy." Right? I mean, they may have some Freudian issues or something, but I'm not sure. But in other words, the point is that when you have a bad dream, you'll also say crazy things when you wake up from a nightmare. So the Gemara therefore says, "Ela kol sheneir ve'eno kari ima." No, it means when the child is fully awake and he's fully conscious and he doesn't want to get out of bed. He says, "Mommy, get me dressed. Mommy, do this. Mommy, do that." When a child is old enough, maybe 26, 27 years old, and he doesn't need his mother anymore to help him with these kinds of things, right? He doesn't need Obamacare anymore, so then he's considered to be obligated in the mitzvah of sukkah. Okay, so that's really what the Mishnah is defining, is that he's reached the age of chinuch, is that he can live independently, at least for, that he can sleep outside without needing mommy to help him. So the Gemara then brought a story that seems to contradict that. It said that Shammai Hazakin, the elder Shammai, put schach over the crib of the newborn infant. So Maisa, this story, you bring me a story to contradict what you just said. The Gemara explains, there's a little piece missing from this Mishnah. You have to insert it as follows. The Shammai Machmir, that Shammai was Machmir and said even an infant is obligated in Sukkah. Umaisa Nami, V'yolda Kalasu Shel Shammai Hazakin Upiches Amahazeva, and this is the story to illustrate it, that when his daughter-in-law had a newborn infant, he put schach on top of the crib so that the child could have a sukkah. We'll just do a few more lines. We're going to do the Mishnah. Kol shivas hayomim adam osa sukkaso keva ubeso aryai. All 7 days of sukkahs, a person has to make his sukkah his fixed place, his mainstay, and his house his occasional place, his happenstance place. Yardu geshamim eimosai mutter lifnos. When it rains, at what point are you allowed to say, okay, it's not, I'm not living here anymore because I can't, I'm not comfortable anymore? At what point does the mitzdayer pater min hasukah principle kick in? At a point where mishatisrach hamikveh, when a mikveh kind of food, which is a food which is neither fully dry nor liquidy, but rather somewhat viscous in the middle, like a porridge, a farina, when that starts to spoil because of all the rainfall, okay? And mashlu amadavar daima la'ebed shebalimzo kos l'rabo v'shafach lo kiton al panav. The analogy of what rain represents on Sukkot, we know this famous analogy, is that if a servant wants to try and pour a glass of wine for his master, and his master takes the entire decanter and spills it all over his servant, he says, no thanks, I don't need your favors. When Hashem makes it rain on Sukkot, forcing us to go inside, this is a sign that He doesn't want our mitzvah. So we should take that as a musar. Tana Rabbanan. The Brisa now says, Kol shivas hayomim adam osa sukkaso keva ubeso aryai. For all 7 days, says the Brisa, you have to make your sukkah your mainstay and your house your secondary place, and a place that's only happenstance. Kate, so what's an example? If you have nice utensils, nice pillows, nice furniture, bring them all up to the sukkah. Ochel v'shosa matayil b'sukkah. And you should eat and drink and relax in the sukkah. We'll hold it here for today. You have a good chodesh.